Glass shattered against marble, spraying fragments across the conference room like deadly confetti. Victor Sterling stood at the head of the table, chest heaving, knuckles white as they gripped the edge of the mahogany surface hard enough to splinter wood. 6 men in expensive suits pressed themselves against the walls, faces pale, nobody daring to breathe too loudly. This wasn't supposed to happen. The shipment was secured. Every precaution taken. And yet somehow, $3 million worth of product sat in a police impound lot instead of the distribution center. Someone would pay. Someone always paid when Victor lost control. Get out. His voice came out low, dangerous. All of you. Now. They scrambled for the door like mice fleeing a cat, expensive shoes squeaking against polished floors. The last man hesitated at the threshold, opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it and vanished. Victor swept his arm across the table. Documents, laptops, coffee cups, all of it crashed to the floor in a cacophony of destruction. The rage burned through him like acid, eating away at reason, at control, at everything that separated him from the animal his enemies claimed he was. 3 years. 3 years since Katya died, and he still couldn't keep the fury leashed. Doctors had tried. Therapists. Medication that left him feeling hollow, but changed nothing. The episodes came without warning, transforming him into something he barely recognized in the mirror afterward. He grabbed a chair and hurled it at the window. The reinforced glass held, but the impact sent spiderweb cracks racing across the surface. His reflection stared back at him, distorted, monstrous. Somewhere distant, an alarm blared. Security protocols for when the boss lost it. Everyone knew the drill by now. Down on the 43rd floor, Eleanor Ashford pushed a cleaning cart through the hallway, earbuds in, trying to drown out the world with music that reminded her of better days. Days when she wore designer clothes instead of a shapeless gray uniform. When people called her Miss Ashford with respect instead of hey you with impatience. 6 months since her life imploded. 6 months of sleeping in a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling. Eating ramen because it was cheap. Scrubbing toilets in the same building where she once attended charity galas. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Her supervisor, Rita, appeared around the corner, moving fast. You. Conference room 6, 45th floor. Now, some kind of mess up there. They need it cleaned before the night shift ends. Eleanor pulled out her earbuds. 45th floor? That's executive level. I thought we weren't supposed to. Just go. Rita thrust a key card into her hand. And be quick about it. Whatever happened up there, they want it dealt with quietly. The elevator ride felt eternal. Eleanor watched the numbers climb, each floor taking her further from the safety of anonymity. Executive level meant important people. Dangerous people. The kind who destroyed her father's empire and didn't lose sleep over collateral damage like disgraced heiresses scrubbing floors. The doors opened onto hushed luxury. Thick carpet, artwork that cost more than most cars, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. The conference room door stood ajar, and through the gap she could see the destruction. Holy hell. Eleanor pushed the cart inside, surveying the damage. It looked like a tornado had torn through the space. Broken glass everywhere, furniture overturned, papers scattered like snow. In the center of the chaos, a man stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid, hands clenched at his sides. She recognized him instantly. Victor Sterling. Everyone in the building knew who he was, even the cleaning staff. Powerful, wealthy, connected to business ventures that existed in the gray areas most people pretended didn't exist. He was attractive in a dangerous way. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that held hints of gray at the temples, despite him being only 38. The kind of man who commanded attention simply by existing. He hadn't noticed her yet. She should leave. Come back later. Not interrupt whatever private breakdown this was. But something about the set of his shoulders, the way his whole body trembled with barely contained violence, made her pause. I said, get out. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone out. I'm just here to clean. Eleanor kept her tone neutral, professional. I can come back if... He spun around, and she got her first clear look at his face. Steel gray eyes blazing with fury, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, a vein pulsing at his temple. This was a man on the edge of something catastrophic. "Do you not understand English?" He took a step toward her, and Eleanor's survival instinct screamed at her to run. "I want everyone gone. That includes you." Through the open door behind him, she could see into his private office. More destruction. And was that blood on his knuckles? He'd hurt himself in whatever rampage had torn through this place. "Your hand is bleeding." The words came out before Eleanor could stop them. "What?" "Your hand." She pointed. "You're hurt." Victor glanced down at his knuckles as if noticing them for the first time. Dark blood welled from splits in the skin where he'd hit something hard enough to damage himself. He stared at the wounds with an expression caught between confusion and contempt. "It doesn't matter." His voice had dropped, some of the edge fading into exhaustion. "Nothing matters." That was when Eleanor did something incredibly stupid. She crossed the space between them, reaching out to take his hand, to assess the damage, to do something helpful in a situation that felt like standing in a minefield. Her fingers closed around his wrist. Victor froze, completely, utterly still, like someone had pressed pause on reality. The rage that had been radiating from him in almost visible waves simply evaporated. His breathing, which had been harsh and rapid, slowed to something approaching normal. The tension in his shoulders eased incrementally. Eleanor felt it too. That strange moment of connection, like completing a circuit. She should let go. This was inappropriate, unprofessional, dangerous. But her hand stayed where it was, and Victor made no move to pull away. "How did you do that?" He stared at her as if she'd performed actual magic. "How did you make it stop?" "Make what stop?" Eleanor tried to keep her voice steady despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "The anger. It just..." His gray eyes searched her face, looking for answers she didn't have. "Who are you?" "Eleanor Ashford." She released his hand, immediately feeling the loss of that strange connection. "I work for the cleaning company. I'm nobody." Recognition flickered across his features. Ashford. The daughter. Heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. So he knew. Of course he knew. Everyone knew about the scandal, about how Julian Ashford's heiress daughter had been caught embezzling $50 million, how she'd lost everything in the most public fall from grace Manhattan society had seen in years. Yes. She lifted her chin, refusing to show shame for crimes she hadn't committed. That Ashford. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a job to do." She turned toward her cleaning cart, needing distance, needing to not see the judgment or pity or whatever else might be written on Victor Sterling's face. But his voice stopped her. "Wait." Eleanor looked back. He was studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, like he could see through skin and bone straight into her thoughts. "Do it again." "Do what again?" "Touch me." The words came out almost like a command. Then he seemed to catch himself. "Please." This was insane. She should refuse, should finish cleaning and get out of here before things got stranger. But there was something in his expression, a desperation that resonated with her own recent experience of losing control, of being at the mercy of forces too big to fight. Eleanor stepped closer and placed her hand on his arm. The same thing happened. Victor's eyes drifted closed. His breathing deepened. And that thrumming violence that had filled the room simply faded away like morning mist under sun. Impossible. He opened his eyes, and for the first time she saw something other than rage in them. Confusion, yes, but also hope. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Victor gestured at the destroyed conference room. "I was 30 seconds away from putting my fist through that window. I've been 30 seconds away from destroying something for 3 years. Doctors, medication, therapy, nothing works. And you just walk in and it stops. Like flipping a switch." Eleanor withdrew her hand carefully. "I think you're giving me too much credit. Maybe you were just calming down on your own." "No." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "No, this was different. This was real." He crossed to his desk in the adjoining office, pulled out a chair that hadn't been destroyed, and sat heavily. For several seconds he just looked at her, mind clearly working through implications Eleanor couldn't begin to guess at. Finally, he spoke. "How much does the cleaning company pay you?" The question caught her off guard. "Why does that matter?" "Because I'm about to offer you a different job." Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gray eyes locked on hers. "Be my assistant. Stay close. Whatever you're doing, whatever this is, I need it." Eleanor's first instinct was to laugh, but something in his expression killed the sound in her throat. "You're serious." "Completely. Name your price." This was crazy. She barely knew this man. Everything about him screamed danger. From his reputation to the destroyed conference room, to the desperate edge in his voice. Getting involved with Victor Sterling would be like diving into shark-infested waters. But he was offering her money. Real money. The kind that could pay off the debts left from her father's scandal, could get her out of that miserable studio apartment, could give her a chance to rebuild something from the ashes of her old life. 1 week. Eleanor heard herself saying, "I'll try it for 1 week. If it works out, we can discuss something longer term." Victor stood, and she was reminded of how physically imposing he was. Easily 6'2", built like someone who could break a person in half if he chose to. But when he extended his hand to shake on the agreement, his touch was careful, almost reverent. 1 week. Deal. As Eleanor's hand met his, she felt that strange connection again, like puzzle pieces sliding into place. She had no idea what she was agreeing to, what consequences this decision would ripple into her already destroyed life. But standing in that ruined conference room, touching a dangerous man who looked at her like she held the keys to his salvation, Eleanor Ashford made a choice that would change everything. 7 a.m. came too early. Eleanor stood outside the Sterling Tower, clutching a coffee she couldn't afford but desperately needed, watching expensive cars pull up to the entrance. Executives in tailored suits strode past her like she didn't exist. A week ago, she would have been one of them. Now she was about to become something else entirely, an assistant to a man who made grown men tremble. A black sedan pulled to the curb, and the back window rolled down to reveal Victor Sterling's sharp features. He looked impossibly put together for this hour. Charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her old salary. Dark hair perfectly styled. Only the faint shadows under his eyes hinted at restless sleep. "Get in." Not a request. Eleanor slid into the leather interior, immediately aware of how her cheap blazer and discount shoes didn't belong in this world of luxury. Victor barely glanced at her, already scrolling through his phone, jaw tight with concentration. "We have 4 meetings today." His tone was all business, no acknowledgement of the strangeness of their arrangement. "The first is at 9 with shipping contractors. You'll sit in, take notes, stay close. If I start to lose control, do what you did last night." "You mean touch you?" Eleanor kept her voice neutral despite the absurdity of the conversation. "In front of your business associates?" Discreetly, Victor finally looked at her, and something in those gray eyes made her pulse quicken. "A hand on my arm. Anything. They don't need to know why." The car pulled into an underground garage, and within minutes Eleanor found herself in an elevator climbing toward the executive floors. Victor stood beside her, radiating tension like a live wire. She could feel it coming off him in waves, that barely leashed violence just waiting for an excuse to break free. The shipping meeting went smoother than expected. Eleanor sat to Victor's right, taking notes on her phone, watching him negotiate terms with 3 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. His control held, though she noticed the way his fingers would tap against the table when discussions got heated. The tightness around his mouth when one contractor pushed back on price points. Halfway through, when the lead negotiator suggested Victor's terms were unreasonable, Eleanor saw the shift. Victor's shoulders went rigid, his breathing changed, and that dangerous energy started building. Without thinking, she reached over and rested her hand briefly on his forearm. The effect was immediate. Victor's posture eased, his next words came out measured instead of sharp, and the meeting continued without incident. The contractors noticed nothing, but Eleanor felt Victor's gaze on her for the rest of the discussion, weighted with something between gratitude and fascination. By the 3rd meeting, she'd done it twice more. Small touches, casual enough to seem coincidental. but each time pulling Victor back from whatever edge he teetered on. It was exhausting in a way she didn't fully understand, like being a lightning rod for someone else's storm. Lunch arrived at his office, catered and expensive. Victor gestured for her to sit across from his desk, rather than leaving like she'd assumed she should. He studied her while taking a bite of food, and Eleanor resisted the urge to squirm under the scrutiny. "Tell me about the scandal." His words were direct, no pretense. What really happened? Eleanor's appetite vanished. "That's not part of my job description. Consider it research." Victor leaned back in his chair. "I need to know who you are, what you're capable of." Capable of? She laughed without humor. "I'm capable of being the perfect scapegoat, apparently. My father needed someone to blame when his embezzlement came to light. I was convenient. You didn't take the money. It wasn't a question." But Eleanor answered anyway. "No. I didn't even know about it until federal agents showed up at my apartment with cameras rolling. My father had planted evidence in my accounts, forged my signature on documents. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd already been convicted in the court of public opinion." Victor's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. "And your fiancé?" "Ex-fiancé." Eleanor took a drink of water to wash away the bitterness. "Michael Brennan, assistant district attorney with political ambitions. He broke off our engagement on live television, said he was disappointed and heartbroken by my moral failings. Very theatrical. Great for his career. Convenient timing. The observation hung in the air between them. Eleanor had thought the same thing countless times during sleepless nights. But hearing someone else voice it made the suspicion feel more real. He got a promotion 3 weeks later. She met Victor's gaze. Senior prosecutor. Youngest in the office's history. Victor pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "I'm putting investigators on your case. All of it. The embezzlement, the timing, your ex-fiancé's sudden career advancement. If there's dirt to find, they'll find it. I can't afford investigators." "I can." Victor set his phone down. "Consider it part of your compensation package." "Why?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Why do you care what happened to me?" "Because I recognize a frame job when I see one." Victor's voice carried an edge of something dark. "And because people who've been betrayed by those they trust. We understand each other in ways others can't." The afternoon brought more meetings, more moments where Eleanor's touch was the only thing standing between Victor and explosion. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, she felt wrung out, like she'd run a marathon. Victor, conversely, seemed calmer than she'd seen him, almost relaxed as he reviewed the day's agreements. This worked. He looked at her with something approaching wonder. 7 meetings, multiple confrontations, and I didn't destroy anything. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Eleanor flexed her fingers, which felt oddly numb. I'm glad it helped. Helped. Victor stood and crossed to the windows overlooking Manhattan. It saved me. He turned back to face her. The 1-week trial, let's extend it. 6 months. I'll pay you $200,000. The number hit Eleanor like physical force. That was more than she'd make in 3 years of cleaning toilets. That was enough to pay off every debt, to start over, to breathe again. But it also meant 6 months tied to this man. This dangerous, volatile presence who looked at her like she was both salvation and mystery. 6 months of being responsible for someone else's demons. I have conditions. Eleanor stood, needing to feel less vulnerable. You don't control my personal life. I choose where I live, what I do outside of work hours. And I'm not involved in anything illegal. I won't risk prison again, even for $200,000. Victor considered this, then nodded. Agreed. But understand something, Eleanor. His tone shifted, became more intense. My life attracts attention. Media, rivals, people who'd love to use anyone close to me as leverage. I'll protect you from that. But you need to trust me. Can you do that? The question felt loaded with implications Eleanor couldn't fully parse. Trust a mafia boss, essentially. Trust a man whose reputation included violence and criminal enterprise. Trust someone who just offered her more money than she'd seen in years. But what choice did she have? Go back to scrubbing floors, drowning in debt, invisible to the world that once celebrated her. Or take this lifeline, dangerous as it was, and maybe claw back some semblance of a future. 6 months. Eleanor extended her hand. Deal. Victor's handshake was warm, firm, and lasted a fraction longer than strictly professional. When he released her, Eleanor could still feel the phantom pressure of his fingers. One more thing. Victor returned to his desk and pulled out a business card. Tomorrow I'm meeting with representatives from the Volkov family. They're, let's say, business associates who mediate conflicts in certain circles. If things get tense, which they will, I'll need you there. What kind of business associates? The kind who run an organization called the Council. Victor's expression grew serious. They oversee disputes between families like mine, enforce agreements, maintain order in places where law doesn't reach. They're powerful, and they're respected. You'll hear me mention them again. Just know that when I do, it means the situation is serious. Eleanor absorbed this, filing away the information. A council that mediated between criminal organizations. Wonderful. Her life just kept getting more surreal. The black sedan dropped her at her apartment building 40 minutes later. As Eleanor climbed the stairs to her studio, she felt Victor's world clinging to her like perfume, expensive and dangerous and intoxicating. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Victor, she assumed, since she'd given him her contact information. The message was simple. My investigators found something already. Your ex-fiancé received a payment of $50,000 the week before your scandal broke. Deposited to an offshore account. Source unknown. We'll have more soon. Eleanor stared at the screen, heart pounding. $50,000. Right before Michael had destroyed her on television. Right before her entire life had collapsed. She typed back, "Thank you." The response came immediately. "Sleep well, Eleanor. Tomorrow starts early." But Eleanor didn't sleep well. She lay awake in the darkness, thinking about mysterious payments and convenient timing, and a gray-eyed man who looked at her like she held answers to questions he'd stopped believing anyone could solve. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse apartment she'd never seen, Victor Sterling stood at his window and thought about a woman whose simple touch did what years of treatment couldn't. A woman with secrets in her past and strength in her eyes. A woman who'd just become essential to his survival, which made her the most dangerous person in his world. Because in Victor's experience, essential things always ended up destroyed. And he'd be damned if he'd let that happen to Eleanor Ashford. Not when she'd already become the only thing keeping him human. 3 weeks transformed into routine. Victor's sedan arrived at Eleanor's building every morning at 6:30. Always punctual. Always with him, already inside reviewing documents on his tablet. They'd share the ride in comfortable silence, stopping at the same coffee shop where he'd memorized her order without her having to repeat it. Caramel macchiato with an extra shot. No whipped cream. Small things like that caught Eleanor off guard. The way he'd hand her the cup without looking up from his work. The way he'd started keeping her favorite pens at his desk after she'd mentioned preferring a specific brand. For a man with a reputation built on violence and intimidation, Victor Sterling paid unsettling attention to details. The pattern of their days had settled into something almost normal. Meetings, negotiations, moments where Eleanor's touch kept Victor from crossing lines he couldn't uncross. She'd gotten better at reading the signs. The subtle shift in his breathing that preceded an outburst. The way his jaw would clench when someone pushed too hard. But tonight was different. Victor had insisted she attend a charity gala, some fundraiser for children's hospitals that attracted Manhattan's elite. Eleanor had tried to refuse, claiming she had nothing appropriate to wear, but a dress had arrived at her apartment that afternoon. Black silk that fit perfectly, elegant without being ostentatious, accompanied by shoes and a simple necklace that probably cost more than her car used to. Now she stood beside Victor in a ballroom glittering with wealth and power, acutely aware of whispers following her. The disgraced Ashford girl, people murmured, not even trying to be subtle. What's she doing with Sterling? How desperate must she be? Eleanor kept her expression neutral, years of etiquette training serving her well even as humiliation burned under her skin. Victor's hand rested lightly on her lower back, possessive in a way that made her hyper-aware of him, of the warmth of his palm through thin fabric. Ignore them. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. They're not worth your energy. Easy for you to say. Eleanor accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. Your reputation actually helps you. Mine just makes me a cautionary tale. Victor's expression darkened slightly, but before he could respond, a man approached. Mid-40s, expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor recognized him vaguely from her old life. Some investment banker whose name she couldn't recall. Sterling. The man extended his hand. "Good to see you. And Miss Ashford. What a surprise. I thought you'd left the city after, well, everything." The emphasis on everything made Eleanor's fingers tighten on her champagne glass. She started to formulate a polite response, but Victor stepped slightly in front of her, the movement subtle but deliberate. "Eleanor works with me now." Victor's tone could have cut glass. "Is there something you needed, Hammond?" "Just making conversation." Hammond's gaze slid to Eleanor with obvious appraisal. "Though I have to say, Sterling, I never pictured you with a charity case. You always had better taste." Eleanor felt Victor go rigid beside her, that familiar tension building in his shoulders. She recognized the signs immediately, the precursor to violence that had become as familiar as breathing. Without thinking, she stepped closer and placed her hand on his arm, fingers curling gently around his forearm. The effect was instantaneous. Victor's breathing steadied, though his eyes remained hard as he stared at Hammond. "You should walk away now, while you still can." Something in Victor's voice must have penetrated Hammond's alcohol-induced bravado. The man paled slightly, muttered something about finding his wife, and disappeared into the crowd. Eleanor kept her hand where it was, feeling the coiled strength beneath expensive fabric, the way Victor's pulse gradually slowed under her touch. Around them, conversations had paused, people pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. "We should go," Eleanor said it quietly, not wanting to cause more of a scene. This was a mistake. "No." Victor turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "We're not running from these vultures. You have every right to be here. More than most of them." His hand came up to rest over hers where it still touched his arm, warm and solid and grounding. The gesture felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with the public setting. Everything to do with the way he looked at her like she mattered, like her presence was the only thing keeping his world from tilting off its axis. Eleanor pulled her hand away, suddenly aware of eyes on them, of speculation that would spread through Manhattan's social circles by morning. Victor Sterling and the disgraced heiress, what a delicious scandal that would make. They made it through another hour before Victor declared he'd done his philanthropic duty and called for his car. Eleanor felt relief flood through her as they stepped into the night air, away from judging stares and cruel whispers. The sedan pulled away from the venue, and silence filled the space between them. Eleanor stared out the window, watching the city slide past in streams of light, trying not to think about how Victor's hand had felt covering hers, about the way he'd defended her without hesitation. "You didn't have to do that." She finally broke the quiet. "Confront Hammond. I'm used to people like him. You shouldn't have to be." Victor's voice carried an edge of anger, not at her but for her. "Nobody should talk to you that way." Eleanor looked at him. Really looked at him. In the dim interior, shadows played across his features, softening the hard edges, making him seem almost vulnerable. A dangerous thought, that. Victor Sterling was many things, but vulnerable wasn't one of them. "Why do you care?" The question came out more raw than she'd intended. "I'm just an employee, someone whose touch happens to calm you down. Why does it matter what people say about me?" Victor held her gaze, and something shifted in the air between them. "Because you're not just an employee." His voice had dropped, gone rough. "You're," he seemed to struggle for words, "important. To my stability, to my ability to function. That makes you important to me." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, a line they shouldn't cross. Professional boundaries existed for reasons, especially when one person held all the power in the dynamic. The car pulled up to her building, and Eleanor reached for the door handle, needing distance, needing to think. Victor's hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "Wait. Just wait a moment." She froze, hyper-aware of his fingers circling her wrist, of how close they sat in the confined space, of how easy it would be to lean in, to find out if his lips were as soft as they looked. Insane thoughts. Dangerous thoughts. I need to go. Eleanor pulled away, breaking contact. Thank you for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. She escaped into her building before he could respond, before she could do something catastrophically stupid like kiss a man who paid her salary, who could destroy what little remained of her life with a single word. But sleep didn't come easy. Eleanor lay in bed, replaying the evening, the way Victor had positioned himself between her and Hammond, the heat in his eyes when he'd called her important. Mixed signals wrapped in professional courtesy, wrapped in something that felt a lot like attraction. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Victor. The investigators found more. Michael Brennan wasn't the only one who received money before your scandal. Your father's accountant, 2 journalists who broke the story, and a judge who fast-tracked the civil case against you. All paid by the same offshore account. Someone orchestrated your destruction. Eleanor stared at the message, ice settling in her stomach. Someone had paid multiple people to ruin her life. This wasn't just her father's betrayal. This was coordinated, intentional, bigger than she'd imagined. She typed back, "Who paid them?" The response took 3 minutes. Still tracing the source. But Eleanor, whoever did this has resources and connections. This wasn't amateur hour. Be careful. I'll have security watching your building tonight. Before she could question that, another text arrived. Sleep well. You're safe, I promise. Eleanor set her phone down with shaking hands. Safe. Such a relative term when her entire world had been systematically demolished by unknown enemies. When she worked for a man who dealt in violence. When her own touch had become a leash for someone else's rage. But lying in the darkness, knowing Victor had people watching her building, knowing he was across the city probably still awake and thinking about the same things she was, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Protected. Dangerous word that. Dangerous feeling. Because protection could become possession, could become another cage dressed up as safety. She'd escaped one cage when her old life burned down. She couldn't let herself walk into another, no matter how attractive the warden, no matter how his touch made her feel seen, for the first time since everything collapsed. Across town, Victor stood at his penthouse window, phone in hand, staring at Eleanor's building on his security feed. He'd lied about having people watch her tonight. He was watching her himself, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking about how she'd touched his arm in that ballroom, how her skin had felt under his palm. 3 years since Katya died. 3 years of fury and isolation, and becoming the monster everyone expected. And then Eleanor Ashford walked into his life, and suddenly he could breathe again. It terrified him, because everyone Victor cared about ended up hurt. Katya's face flashed through his memory. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd looked at him with hero worship in her eyes right up until Vincent Kane put a bullet in her head. Victor's hands clenched into fists. He wouldn't let that happen to Eleanor. Whatever it took, whoever he had to destroy, she'd stay safe, even if staying safe meant staying away from him. But God, that was getting harder every day. Julian Ashford looked exactly as Eleanor remembered, impeccably dressed, silver hair perfectly styled, expression radiating the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. Seeing him across the table in Victor's private conference room made bile rise in her throat. Eleanor. Her father's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're looking well. This new position seems to suit you. What do you want? Eleanor kept her voice level, despite the rage simmering beneath her skin. Victor sat beside her, silent but present. A coiled spring waiting to release. Can't a father visit his daughter? Julian spread his hands in mock innocence. I heard you were working for Mr. Sterling here. Thought perhaps we could discuss a business opportunity. The 3 of us. Victor's hand twitched on the table. Eleanor placed her fingers over his knuckles, a subtle gesture that nonetheless drew Julian's sharp gaze. Interesting dynamic they had. His expression seemed to say, leverage. There is no 3 of us. Eleanor withdrew her hand from Victor's, refusing to give her father ammunition. You made that clear when you framed me for your crimes. Such harsh words. Julian's mask of civility cracked slightly. I did what was necessary to protect the family business. You were always so naive, Eleanor. In the real world, sacrifices must be made. Sacrifices. Victor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Interesting word choice for destroying your daughter's life. Mr. Sterling, surely you understand. Julian turned his attention to Victor. Businessman to businessman. In our world, sometimes collateral damage is unavoidable. I'm certain you've made similar calculations. Eleanor watched Victor's jaw clench, saw the familiar signs of rage building. But this time, something else flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Control. He was choosing his response rather than being consumed by fury. Get to the point, Ashford. Why are you here? Julian pulled a folder from his briefcase, slid it across the table. A real estate development in Brooklyn. Prime location. Enormous profit potential. I need investors. Someone with Mr. Sterling's resources and influence could make this project wildly successful. Victor didn't touch the folder. And in exchange? In exchange, perhaps certain uncomfortable truths about my daughter's situation could be quietly revised. Julian's smile turned predatory. Public opinion is malleable after all. With the right pressure, Eleanor could be rehabilitated in society's eyes. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. He was offering to fix the reputation he'd destroyed, dangling her old life like a carrot, all to rope Victor into what was almost certainly another fraudulent scheme. No. The word came out harder than Eleanor intended. I don't want anything from you. Not your deals, not your redemption, nothing. Don't be foolish, Eleanor. Julian's mask slipped further. You're cleaning offices and playing assistant to a gangster. I'm offering you a way back. Playing assistant to a gangster. Victor repeated the words softly, dangerously. That's what you think she's doing? Isn't she? Julian leaned back, confident again. Come now, Sterling. We both know how these arrangements work. Pretty girl, powerful man, mutually beneficial situation. No judgment from me. I just want to leverage the relationship for something productive. The shift in Victor was instantaneous. One moment he sat controlled, the next he was on his feet, hands flat on the table, murder in his eyes. Eleanor felt the rage rolling off him like heat from a furnace. Get out. Victor's voice dropped to lethal quiet. Before I forget, Eleanor asked me not to kill you. Julian stood hastily, grabbing his folder. You're making a mistake. Both of you. That project could have made us millions. Eleanor rose as well, stepped between her father and Victor, not touching but present. She looked Julian in the eyes, saw the man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped with homework and destroyed her without hesitation. You want to know what's foolish? Trusting you. Believing family meant something. She kept her voice steady. I'd rather scrub toilets for the rest of my life than take a single dollar connected to you. Something flickered across Julian's face. Might have been regret. If Eleanor believed he was capable of it. You'll regret this. Both of you. That sounded like a threat. Victor moved beside Eleanor, and she felt his barely restrained violence like electricity in the air. Want to rephrase that? Julian recognized his mistake. He adjusted his tie, reclaimed his composure. Just business advice. The world is smaller than you think. Enemies become allies. Allies become enemies. You'd do well to remember that. He left without another word, the door closing with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot. Eleanor stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Her father had tried to use her, tried to manipulate Victor through her, and somehow it hurt just as much as the original betrayal. She felt Victor's hand on her shoulder, gentle pressure that grounded her. Are you all right? No. Eleanor turned to face him. He offered to give me back my reputation. My old life, and all I felt was disgust. Good. Victor's gray eyes searched her face. Because that life, those people, they never deserved you. The intensity of his words hit Eleanor like physical force. She was suddenly aware of how close they stood, of the way Victor's hand remained on her shoulder, thumb tracing absent patterns against her collarbone through her blouse. You wanted to kill him. It wasn't a question. Yes. Victor didn't look away. I wanted to tear him apart for what he did to you, for what he just tried to do, but you asked me not to, so I won't. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. He'd choose restraint for her, would choose a path he didn't want because she'd asked it of him. Thank you. Eleanor's voice came out softer than intended. For choosing differently. Victor's hand slid from her shoulder down her arm, stopping at her wrist where her pulse hammered visibly. Eleanor. The way he said her name felt intimate, loaded with things neither of them should be feeling. I need to tell you something. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Eleanor knew she should step back, should re-establish professional distance, but her feet wouldn't cooperate. I'm going to have my team dig into every aspect of your father's business. Victor's thumb pressed against her pulse point. Every transaction, every partner, every dirty deal. We're going to expose him, legally, completely. He'll face consequences for what he did. Eleanor's breath caught. That could take months. Resources. Money. I have all three. Victor's other hand came up to cup her face, and Eleanor's eyes drifted closed at the contact. You deserve justice. Real justice, not the corrupt version that destroyed you. When she opened her eyes, Victor's face was inches from hers. She could see flecks of darker gray in his irises, the faint scar on his jaw, the way his gaze dropped to her lips, then back up. This is a bad idea. Eleanor whispered it even as she swayed closer. You're my boss. I work for you. We can't. I know. Victor's voice had gone rough, strained. I know all the reasons this is wrong. But Eleanor, you've been keeping me sane for weeks. Every morning I wake up thinking about seeing you. Every night I can't sleep because I'm wondering if you're safe. This stopped being just professional a long time ago. For me too. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I tell myself it's gratitude, that I'm just confused because you're helping me. But it's not. It's... She struggled for words. More. Victor's hand tightened fractionally against her face. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. My world is dangerous. People will try to use you against me. Your life will get more complicated. Not less. My life is already destroyed. Eleanor let herself lean into his touch. Maybe complicated is better than empty. The distance between them disappeared. Victor's lips met hers, tentative at first, questioning. Eleanor answered by gripping his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with weeks of pent-up tension and attraction and need. He kissed like he did everything else, intense and focused and all-consuming. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him, and Eleanor felt the controlled strength in his body, the careful way he held her like something precious that might break. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. Tell me this is real. Not gratitude, not obligation. Real. Eleanor's hands remained fisted in his shirt. I'm terrified of you. Of this. Of how much I want this despite every logical reason I shouldn't. That's not an answer. It's real. Eleanor pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Probably the most real thing I've felt in months. But Victor, I can't be just another thing you own. If we do this, I need to matter as more than someone who keeps you calm. You think I see you as a tool. Victor's expression shifted to something raw. Eleanor, you're the only person in 3 years who's looked at me and seen something worth saving. You matter. God, you matter more than you should. The vulnerability in his voice undid something in Eleanor's chest. She kissed him again, slower this time, deeper, letting herself feel without overthinking. Victor responded in kind, one hand tangling in her hair, the other splayed across her lower back. When they finally separated, Eleanor felt drunk on sensation, on the taste of him, on the way he looked at her like she'd hung the moon. Come home with me. Victor's voice was barely above a whisper. Not just to talk. To be together without the office, without roles we're supposed to play. Eleanor knew she should hesitate, should consider consequences. But she'd been careful her whole life, and it had gotten her nothing but betrayal and ruin. Okay. The word felt like permission and promise and terrifying possibility all at once. Yes. Victor's smile transformed his face, softened the hard edges that usually defined him. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. We'll take it slow. Whatever pace you need. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. They gathered their things in comfortable silence, and when Victor's hand found hers in the elevator, fingers intertwining, it felt natural, right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Even if the picture they formed was dangerous and complicated, and absolutely nothing like what Eleanor had imagined her life would become. But standing beside Victor Sterling, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm, Eleanor realized she didn't want safe anymore. She wanted real. She wanted this. Consequences be damned. Victor's apartment existed in a different stratosphere from Eleanor's studio. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom. Modern furniture that probably cost more than cars, and a silence that felt almost sacred after the constant noise of her neighborhood. But what struck Eleanor most were the photographs. Dozens of them, all featuring the same young woman with dark hair and Victor's eyes. His sister, Katya. She was beautiful. Eleanor studied a photo of Katya laughing, caught mid-motion, full of life. You keep her everywhere. Victor emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine, followed her gaze to the photos. After she died, I couldn't look at pictures of her, put them all away. But then I realized forgetting hurt worse than remembering. He handed Eleanor a glass, and they stood side by side, looking at the captured moments of a life cut short. How old was she? 22. Victor's voice went rough. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. My war became hers. Vincent Kane. Eleanor had heard the name in whispers around Victor's organization, always spoken with hatred. He killed her. Victor nodded, jaw tight. 3 years ago, I'd interfered with a trafficking operation he was running. Young girls from Eastern Europe, sold to the highest bidder. I couldn't let it continue, couldn't look the other way, so I burned his operation to the ground and freed everyone I could find. That was the right thing to do. It got my sister murdered. Victor drained half his wine in one swallow. Kane couldn't touch me directly, so he went after Katya. Made sure I watched the security footage afterwards so I'd know exactly what happened. Who was responsible? Eleanor set down her glass and took Victor's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You didn't kill her. A monster with a gun did. Don't carry his sin. But Victor's eyes held a darkness Eleanor recognized, the kind that came from survivor's guilt, from loving someone and failing to protect them. I should have seen it coming. Should have sent her away, somewhere safe. You can't live in should-haves. Eleanor's thumbs traced his cheekbones. Trust me, I've tried. They'll eat you alive. Something shifted in Victor's expression. He set his glass aside and pulled Eleanor close, wrapping his arms around her, face buried in her hair. They stood like that for long minutes, holding each other. 2 broken people finding comfort in shared understanding. Eventually they moved to the couch, conversation flowing easier now. Victor told her about wanting to be an architect, about sketches he used to draw of impossible buildings, about dreams that died when his father's empire demanded an heir. Eleanor shared her own abandoned dreams, piano performances in concert halls, music that lived in her head but never made it to her fingers anymore. Why did you stop? Victor's hand rested on her knee. Casual intimacy that felt earned now. My father said artists starve, that I needed practical skills, business acumen, something useful. Eleanor laughed without humor. Ironic, considering he was embezzling millions. Apparently, practical skills included creative accounting. Victor's hand tightened on her knee. Tomorrow my investigators are meeting with us. They've found something big. Something that connects your father to people you wouldn't expect. Like who? Victor hesitated, then seemed to decide she deserved truth. Like Vincent Kane. Like the same man who killed my sister. The words hit Eleanor like ice water. Her father, connected to Victor's enemy. To a murderer. No, that can't be right. Financial transactions going back 18 months. Dozens of them, moving through shell companies. But the pattern is there. Victor's voice gentled. Eleanor, I think your father didn't just betray you. I think he was working with Kane, and you became collateral damage in something bigger. Eleanor stood, needing to move, to process. Her father, allied with the man who'd destroyed Victor's life. The man who trafficked human beings. The nausea returned full force. Why? What could Kane possibly offer him? Protection, most likely. Victor rose as well, staying close but not touching. Kane has connections to dirty prosecutors, judges, politicians. If your father was already embezzling, If he needed someone to help cover his tracks or make problems disappear, Kane would have been a valuable ally, and I was the problem that disappeared. Eleanor's voice shook. Dear God, Victor, did he plan this with Kane? Plan to destroy me? Victor's arms came around her from behind, solid and warm. I don't know yet, but I swear to you, we'll find out. Every detail, every transaction, every lie, and then we'll make them pay. Eleanor turned in his embrace, looked up at this man who'd gone from stranger to anchor in a matter of weeks. You keep saving me. Keep offering to fight my battles. Our battles. Victor corrected, fingers threading through her hair. Kane destroyed both our lives. Your father enabled him. This isn't just your fight anymore. The ferocity in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made Eleanor feel something she hadn't experienced since her world collapsed. Protected. Valued. Seen. She kissed him, and this time there was no hesitation. No questioning. Victor responded immediately, lifting her, carrying her to his bedroom like she weighed nothing. They made love slowly, carefully, Victor treating her like something precious. Eleanor learning the landscape of his body, the scars and strength and surprising gentility. Afterward, lying tangled in expensive sheets, Eleanor traced the scar on Victor's jaw. How'd you get this? Knife fight when I was 19. Victor's finger traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Some rival family's son thought he could make a name for himself by taking out the Sterling heir. He was wrong. Did you kill him? No. Victor met her eyes. I disarmed him and walked away. That was before Katya. Before I learned that mercy gets the people you love murdered. Eleanor heard the weight in those words. The way violence had become Victor's default after losing his sister. But tonight, with her, he'd been gentle, controlled, human. You're not a monster. She said it firmly, needing him to believe it. Monsters don't mourn their sisters, don't offer justice to disgraced heiresses, don't hold people like they're made of glass. Victor's expression softened. You make me want to be better. To find the person I was before everything went dark. Eleanor kissed him softly. Maybe we can find that person together. They fell asleep entangled. And for the first time in 3 years, Victor didn't have nightmares about Katya dying. Eleanor didn't dream about courtrooms and cameras and public humiliation. They simply rested. Two damaged souls finding peace in proximity. Morning brought harsh reality. Victor's phone rang at 6, and his expression darkened as he listened. When he hung up, the softness from last night had vanished, replaced by cold fury. What's wrong? Eleanor sat up, clutching the sheet. Vincent Kane requested a meeting through the council. Victor's voice had gone flat, dangerous. He wants to negotiate a truce, mediated by neutral territory. The council. Eleanor remembered Victor mentioning them, the organization that mediated disputes between families. Can he do that? Just request a meeting? Anyone can request. Victor pulled on clothes with sharp, aggressive movements. Whether the council grants it depends on circumstances. But Kane knows they'll approve this. He's made too much noise lately, drawn too much attention. They'll want to restore order. Will you go? I have to. Victor turned to face her. Refusing a council summons is essentially declaring war on everyone. But Eleanor, he's going to use you. Make comments, try to provoke me. That's what he does, finds weaknesses and exploits them. Then I'm coming with you. Eleanor stood, wrapping the sheet around herself. I won't be a weakness you have to hide. Absolutely not. Victor's expression turned stony. It's too dangerous. Everything about your life is dangerous. Eleanor crossed to him, refused to back down. If I stay hidden, I look like a liability. You look like you're protecting a vulnerability. But if I'm there, if I stand beside you, we show strength, unity. Victor stared at her for a long moment, clearly torn between protection instincts and strategic logic. Finally, he exhaled roughly. You don't back down, do you? Not anymore. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. I've lost everything once. I'm not losing this, losing you, because I was too scared to fight. Victor pulled her close, kissed her forehead. This is real, isn't it? What's happening between us? Yes. Eleanor's voice held certainty she hadn't felt about anything in months. It's terrifying and probably ill-advised, but it's real. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at an exclusive club in Midtown, neutral ground controlled by the council. Victor spent the day preparing, briefing Eleanor on protocols, on how to behave in the presence of people who settled disputes with violence when diplomacy failed. When they arrived, Eleanor wore the black dress from the charity gala, armor in the form of silk and confidence. Victor's hand rested on her back as they entered, and she felt every eye in the room assess them, calculate, judge. Vincent Kane sat at a corner table, flanked by two men who radiated menace. He was handsome in a cold way, blonde hair, sharp features, smile that held no warmth. When he saw Eleanor, his expression lit with malicious interest. Sterling. Kane stood, extended a hand Victor didn't take. And this must be the infamous Eleanor Ashford. Your father speaks highly of you. The words confirmed what Eleanor had suspected. Her father and Kane, allied, friendly even. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected. Victor's hand tightened on her back, but his voice remained controlled. Let's get to the point, Kane. Why are we here? Kane's smile widened. To discuss territory, business arrangements. Surely we can find compromise that benefits everyone. But his eyes, when they slid to Eleanor again, promised something else entirely. Promised that this was just the opening move in a game she didn't fully understand yet. A game where she'd somehow become the most valuable piece on the board. The council mediator, a severe woman named Adriana Cross, sat at the head of the table with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding dangerous men. She gestured for everyone to sit, and the negotiation began with territorial discussions that Eleanor barely followed, legal jargon mixed with veiled threats. Vincent Kane proposed splitting operational zones, offering Victor control of land-based transportation while keeping port access for himself. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. But Eleanor watched Victor's jaw tighten, recognized the trap, even if she didn't understand the specifics. Your proposal leaves me dependent on your goodwill for overseas shipments. Victor's voice remained level. That's not negotiation, Kane. That's surrender. I prefer to think of it as cooperation. Kane's smile never reached his eyes. We've been at odds too long, Sterling. Time to evolve past old grievances. Old grievances. Victor's hands flexed on the table. Is that what you call murdering my sister? The room temperature seemed to drop. Adriana Cross raised a hand before Kane could respond. Gentlemen, this is precisely why the council exists, to move beyond cycles of vengeance. Mr. Kane, address the accusation, or we proceed with formal investigation. Kane's expression flickered, annoyance breaking through his facade. Katya Sterling's death was tragic, but it occurred during a legitimate business dispute. She was collateral damage, nothing more. Eleanor felt Victor vibrating with rage beside her. She placed her hand on his thigh under the table, subtle pressure that helped him breathe through the fury. Kane noticed, his gaze sharpening with interest. Fascinating. Kane leaned back. I'd heard rumors about your new assistant, Sterling, but seeing it in person is quite remarkable, like watching someone gentle a rabid dog. Victor started to rise, but Eleanor's grip tightened. She spoke before he could. Mr. Kane, I'm curious about something. You mentioned my father. How exactly do you know Julian Ashford? Kane's attention shifted to her, predatory and calculating. Your father and I have mutual business interests. We've collaborated on several profitable ventures. Surely you knew that, being his daughter. I knew my father was a criminal. Eleanor kept her voice steady. I didn't know he associated with murderers and human traffickers. But I suppose embezzlers can't be choosy about their partners. Adriana Cross's eyebrow raised fractionally. This is a new development, Miss Ashford. You're alleging a business relationship between your father and Mr. Kane? Not alleging. Eleanor pulled out her phone, accessed the files Victor's investigators had compiled, stating fact. 18 months of financial transactions, shell companies, money laundering operations. My father provided legitimate business fronts. Kane provided protection from legal consequences. A mutually beneficial arrangement, that required destroying my reputation when I got too close to discovering the embezzlement. Kane's expression hardened. That's quite a story. Do you have proof? Eleanor slid her phone to Adriana Cross. 70 pages of bank records, shell company registrations and communications. All documented, all traceable. The mediator reviewed the files, her expression remaining neutral, but her fingers tapping faster on the screen as she scrolled. When she looked up, her gaze moved between Kane and Victor. This changes the nature of this meeting. If these allegations prove accurate, Mr. Kane, you've violated council protocols by conducting unauthorized operations with non-sanctioned partners. Kane stood abruptly. This is clearly falsified evidence. Sterling and his little pet have fabricated this to discredit me. Then you won't mind a full council investigation. Adriana's voice held steel. We'll verify every transaction, trace every dollar. If Miss Ashford's evidence is legitimate, you'll face formal charges. If it's false, Sterling will answer for bringing false accusations to council mediation. Victor spoke for the first time in minutes. I welcome investigation, but I have one more piece of information the council should know. He nodded to one of his men, who placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of Michael Brennan meeting with Kane, accepting envelopes, shaking hands outside buildings Eleanor recognized from the financial district. Michael Brennan, former fiancé to Miss Ashford, current assistant district attorney. Victor's voice carried across the room. He received $50,000 from Kane 1 week before Eleanor's scandal broke. He was paid to destroy her reputation on television, to fast-track legal proceedings, to ensure she had no chance of defending herself. Eleanor stared at the photos, feeling ice settle in her stomach. She'd suspected Michael's betrayal had deeper roots, but seeing the evidence, the casual way he smiled while selling her out, made it real in a way that hurt worse than she'd expected. Kane's expression turned ugly. You have no proof those payments came from me. Could have been anyone. The money came from the same offshore account that paid the journalists who broke Eleanor's story. Victor produced another document. The same account that paid a judge to fast-track the civil case against her. The same account that's been funding your operations for 3 years. We've traced it all, Kane. Every transaction leads back to you. Adriana Cross closed the folder with a decisive snap. This meeting is concluded. Mr. Kane, you're ordered to appear before a full council tribunal in 48 hours. Until then, you're restricted to council-monitored locations. Mr. Sterling, Miss Ashford, your evidence will be independently verified. If authentic, the council will take appropriate action. Kane stood, and the mask of civility shattered completely. This isn't over, Sterling. You think you've won because your little whore dug up some numbers? I've been planning this for years. You have no idea what's coming. Before anyone could stop him, Kane turned to Eleanor. Your father sends his regards, by the way. He wanted me to tell you he's proud of how useful you've become. Finally serving the family interests, even if you don't realize it. The words hit like a physical blow. Eleanor stood on shaking legs. What does that mean? Kane's smile turned vicious. Ask your boyfriend. Ask him what happens to everyone he cares about. Victor moved faster than Eleanor had ever seen him move, crossing the distance, slamming Kane against the wall with a hand around his throat. You touch her, you even breathe in her direction, and council rules won't protect you. Adriana Cross barked orders, and Kane's men moved to intervene, but Victor's security blocked them. For a moment, violence hung in the balance, one wrong move away from bloodshed. Victor, Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos. Let him go. He's not worth it. Something in her tone reached him. Victor released Kane, who stumbled back, gasping, murder in his eyes. But Eleanor was right. Not here, not now, not with the council watching. Kane straightened his suit and left without another word, his men following. The club emptied quickly after that, everyone understanding that the real danger was just beginning. In the car back to Victor's apartment, Eleanor sat in silence, processing everything. Her father's involvement with Kane, Michael's paid betrayal, the revelation that she'd been systematically destroyed as part of some larger scheme. Say something. Victor finally broke the quiet. Please. Eleanor turned to look at him. This man who'd somehow become everything to her in a matter of weeks. Kane threatened me. Specifically, what did he mean about everyone you care about? Victor's hands tightened on his knees. Before Katya, there was someone else. A woman I was going to marry. Kane found out about her, used her to get to me. She didn't die, but he made sure she suffered. Broke her in ways that... He stopped, jaw clenched. After that, I swore I'd never care about anyone again. Never give him that leverage. But you care about me. Eleanor's voice came out small, which means I'm a target now. You were already a target. Victor met her eyes. The moment you touched me, the moment you became important, Kane would have noticed. He sees everything. Plans, everything. That's why he orchestrated your father's scheme. Why he made sure you had nowhere to go, no resources. He was setting up pieces on a chessboard months before we even met. The realization settled over Eleanor like a shroud. Her entire destruction, the scandal, the betrayal, all of it had been aimed at this moment, at making her vulnerable, desperate enough to take any job offered, putting her in Victor's path. Kane had weaponized her without her even knowing. He used me. Eleanor's voice shook. Used my father, Michael, everyone. All to hurt you. Victor pulled her close, and Eleanor buried her face in his shoulder. I'm sorry. God, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if I'd realized what he was planning. You couldn't have known. Eleanor pulled back, wiped her eyes. Neither of us could. But Victor, what happens now? The council investigation could take weeks. Kane knows we have evidence against him. What's he going to do? Something desperate. Victor's expression turned grim. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. We need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere Kane can't reach. Eleanor started to protest. But Victor's phone rang. He answered, listened, his face draining of color. When he hung up, his hand was shaking. What? Eleanor gripped his arm. What happened? My investigators. Victor's voice came out hollow. The ones who compiled all the evidence against Kane and your father. Their office was just firebombed. 2 dead, 3 in critical condition. And Kane left a message in spray paint on the wall. What did it say? Victor met her eyes, and Eleanor saw fear there for the first time. Real, visceral fear. It said, "She's next." Eleanor's world tilted. Kane wasn't waiting for the council tribunal. He was eliminating threats, sending messages, and she'd just been marked for death. We're going to my safe house. Victor was already calling someone, giving orders. Tonight. Now. Pack nothing. Bring nothing that can be traced. Eleanor, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? Eleanor thought about running. About how her life had become a nightmare of violence and conspiracy. But she looked at Victor, saw the determination in his eyes, the fierce protectiveness, and made her choice. Yes, I trust you. Victor pulled her into a brief, desperate kiss. I won't let him hurt you. Whatever it takes, however far we have to go, you'll be safe. I promise. As the car sped through Manhattan toward an unknown destination, Eleanor realized she'd crossed a threshold. There was no going back to cleaning offices, no return to normal life, no escape from the web of violence and vengeance she'd stumbled into. She was in Victor Sterling's world now. Completely, irrevocably, dangerously. And Vincent Kane was coming for them both. The safe house sat 2 hours north of the city, nestled in wooded hills that felt like a different planet from Manhattan's chaos. Modern architecture blended with natural surroundings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake. Security systems, Victor assured her, were military-grade. For 3 days, they'd existed in this bubble, waiting for the council's tribunal, waiting for Kane's next move. Eleanor stood at the window, watching dawn paint the water gold and pink. Behind her, she heard Victor moving in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing. A routine they'd fallen into despite the circumstances, despite the constant awareness that Vincent Kane wanted her dead. You're up early. Victor appeared beside her, handed her a mug. Couldn't sleep? Too many thoughts. Eleanor accepted the coffee gratefully. The council tribunal is today. What happens if they rule in Kane's favor? They won't. Victor's certainty was absolute. The evidence is ironclad. Kane violated too many protocols, drew too much attention. The council will sanction him at minimum. At most, They'll authorize permanent removal. You mean execution? Yes. Victor didn't sugarcoat it. That's how this world works, Eleanor. You violate the rules, threaten the balance, you're eliminated. It's brutal but effective. Eleanor processed that. Tried to reconcile the man beside her, gentle with her, carefully brewing coffee exactly how she liked it, with the reality of his world where execution was just another Tuesday. Kane killed your sister. If the council orders his death, will that be enough? Will it bring you peace? Victor was quiet for a long moment. I used to think revenge would fix everything, that watching Kane die would fill the hole Katya left. But now, his hand found Eleanor's, fingers intertwining. I just want it over. Want to move forward instead of being trapped in that moment forever. They stood in comfortable silence until Victor's phone shattered the peace. He answered, listened, his expression darkening with each passing second. When he hung up, Eleanor knew before he spoke that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The council convened 2 hours ago. Victor's voice was tight. Kane never showed up. He disappeared sometime last night, and the council just issued a kill-on-sight order. He's officially a fugitive. But that means... Eleanor's stomach dropped. He's got nothing to lose now. Victor was already moving, pulling out his phone, making calls. His security team mobilized around the house, armed men taking positions, checking perimeters. Eleanor felt the shift from safe haven to fortress, watched Victor transform from the man who made her coffee to the dangerous boss his reputation promised. I need to go into the city. Victor pulled on a jacket, checked his weapon with practiced ease. The council wants a meeting, needs my testimony about Kane's operations. I'll have a full security team here, Eleanor. 20 men, all trained. You'll be safe. Or you could take me with you. Eleanor crossed to him. Safety in numbers, right? No. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Kane is desperate now. He'll make a move, and when he does, I need to know you're somewhere he can't reach. Please, Eleanor. Trust me on this. Eleanor wanted to argue, but the fear in Victor's eyes stopped her. She nodded reluctantly. How long will you be gone? 4 hours. Maybe 5. Victor pulled her close, kissed her thoroughly. Stay inside. Stay alert. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. After he left, the house felt too large, too quiet, despite the armed men stationed at every entrance. Eleanor tried to distract herself with a book, with music, with anything that would stop her mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Her phone rang at noon. Sarah Chen, Victor's doctor and friend, the one person outside his organization Eleanor had connected with. Want company? I'm going stir-crazy at my apartment, and Victor said you could probably use a friendly face. God, yes. Eleanor felt relief flood through her. Please come. Sarah arrived 30 minutes later, bringing lunch from Eleanor's favorite cafe and a bottle of wine. They ate on the terrace, talking about everything except the danger lurking just beyond the property line. Sarah was sharp, funny, easy to talk to, and for a few hours, Eleanor almost forgot she was hiding from a man who'd orchestrated her destruction. You're good for him, you know. Sarah poured them both more wine. Victor, I've known him for years. Watched him spiral after Katya died. You've given him something to fight for besides revenge. I feel like I've brought him nothing but complications. Eleanor stared into her glass. Kane targeted me to get to Victor. Everything that's happened is because of me. Kane targeted you because he's a sociopath who sees people as tools. Sarah's voice was firm. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did Victor. You're both just trying to survive. They finished lunch and moved inside. The afternoon sun too warm on the terrace. Sarah glanced at her phone, frowned. I need to run out for about 20 minutes. Pharmacy, forgot my prescription. Will you be okay? Eleanor gestured to the security team visible through the windows. I'm surrounded by armed guards. I'll survive 20 minutes. After Sarah left, Eleanor wandered the house, restless. She ended up in Victor's study, surrounded by his books and papers, photos of Katya mixed with architectural drawings he'd done years ago, dreams abandoned for duty, for violence, for a life that had consumed everything gentle in him. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Missed the cafe on 3rd? Michael Brennan. Eleanor's blood went cold. Michael, her ex-fiancé, the man who'd betrayed her on Kane's payroll. Why was he contacting her now? Another text. I know you think I'm the enemy, but Kane is forcing me to testify against you tomorrow. Says he'll kill me if I don't. I need your help. Please, meet me? Eleanor's finger hovered over the delete button. This was obviously a trap. Michael worked for Kane, had destroyed her deliberately. But something nagged at her. A tiny possibility that he was telling the truth, that Kane was using him like he'd used everyone else. She typed back. Where? Small cafe, Riverside. 20 minutes. Come alone or I'll disappear. Eleanor stared at the message. Alone. In public. Relatively safe, but alone. Victor would lose his mind if he knew. But if Michael really had information, if he could testify against Kane, it could end this nightmare faster. She made a decision she'd regret for the rest of her life. She told the security team she was going to take a bath, locked herself in the bathroom, and climbed out the window. The cafe was 15 minutes away by the car Sarah had left parked out front. Eleanor's hands shook on the steering wheel, knowing this was stupid, knowing she was breaking every promise she'd made to Victor. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this mattered, that Michael might be the key to ending Kane's threat permanently. The cafe was small, quiet, only a handful of customers. Michael sat in the back corner, looking haunted, older than his 31 years. When he saw Eleanor, relief and shame warred on his face. You came. He stood as she approached. I wasn't sure you would. You have 2 minutes. Eleanor remained standing, ready to run. What do you want? Michael pulled out a flash drive. Everything. Kane's operations, his contacts, his plans. I've been documenting it all. Insurance in case he turned on me. But Eleanor, he knows about us meeting. He's watching. His eyes went wide, looking over her shoulder. Eleanor turned too late. She caught a glimpse of movement, felt arms grab her, smelled chloroform before darkness swallowed everything. When consciousness returned, Eleanor found herself in a concrete room that stank of rust and mildew. Her head pounded, wrists zip-tied behind a metal chair. Across from her, Vincent Kane sat on a crate, looking relaxed, victorious. Welcome back. Kane's smile was poison. I hope the trip wasn't too uncomfortable. Michael, where is he? Gone. Kane waved dismissively. Useful idiot served his purpose. Though I must say, Eleanor, climbing out a bathroom window? Very resourceful. Almost made it too easy, though. Eleanor's mind raced through options, finding nothing but dead ends. Victor doesn't know where I am. Killing me won't hurt him if he can't find my body. Oh, he'll find you. Kane stood, pulled out his phone. I sent him your location 10 minutes ago. He's probably halfway here already, bringing all his men, walking right into the ambush I've prepared. You see, this was never about killing you, Eleanor. You're bait. The trap Sterling is too emotional to avoid. Horror crashed over Eleanor. She'd done exactly what Kane wanted, left safety, made herself vulnerable, and now Victor was walking into a kill zone because of her. He won't come. Eleanor tried to sound confident. He's smarter than that. He's in love with you. Kane's voice carried certainty. People in love do stupid things. Like right now, for instance, he's ignoring council advice, ignoring his own security team's recommendations, racing to save you. And when he gets here, when he's distracted and emotional and desperate, my men will cut him down. Eleanor fought against the zip ties, knowing it was useless but unable to stop. You won't win. The council has a kill order on you. You're dead either way. But I'll take Sterling with me. Kane crouched in front of her. That's all that matters now. He destroyed my operations, took everything from me. So I'll take everything from him. Starting with you, then him, then I'll disappear. New identity, new country. I've been planning this contingency for years. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Kane straightened, pulled out a gun. Show time. The door exploded inward, and chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, bodies moving too fast to track. Eleanor threw herself in the chair sideways, hitting the ground hard, trying to stay small, invisible. Through the melee, she saw Victor, face twisted with rage and fear, fighting his way toward her. He moved like violence personified, taking down Kane's men with brutal efficiency. But there were too many, and Kane had positioned himself behind Eleanor, gun pressed to her head. "Stop." Kane's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone stop, or I paint the walls with her brains." Victor froze. His eyes met Eleanor's across the room, and she saw the calculation there, the desperate search for any way to save her. His men stood behind him, weapons trained on Kane, stalemate written in blood and gunpowder. "Let her go, Kane." Victor's voice shook. "This is between us." "No." Kane's arm tightened around Eleanor's throat. "This is about you watching someone you love die, just like I watched my empire burn because of you." Eleanor felt Kane's finger tighten on the trigger, felt time slow to impossible clarity. She remembered the self-defense training Victor's guards practiced, the techniques she'd watched during boring afternoons at the safe house. Long shot, probably wouldn't work, but she had seconds before Kane pulled that trigger. She dropped her weight suddenly, throwing Kane off balance, simultaneously slamming her head backward into his face. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second, and Eleanor threw herself sideways. Victor's gun barked once. Kane stumbled back, red spreading across his chest, shock replacing triumph on his face. He tried to raise his weapon, but Victor fired twice more, and Kane fell. Victor was there instantly, cutting Eleanor's zip ties, checking her for injuries, his hands shaking as they moved over her. "Are you hurt? Did he, God, Eleanor, did he hurt you?" "I'm okay." Eleanor's voice came out raw. "Victor, I'm sorry. I thought Michael was... I didn't mean to." The words tumbled out incoherently. Victor pulled her against him, and Eleanor felt him trembling, felt the terror he'd been holding at bay crash over him now that she was safe. "When she's next. When I saw that text. When I realized you were gone. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Just had to find you." Sirens wailed in the distance. "The council's people," Victor said, pulling back to look at Eleanor's face. "They helped track Kane, provided the assault team. It's over, Eleanor. He's dead. It's finally over." Eleanor looked at Kane's body, felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion. Victor helped her to her feet, kept his arm around her as they walked out of the warehouse into afternoon sunlight that felt surreal after the darkness. The council representative was waiting, the same severe woman from the mediation, Adriana Cross. She took Victor's statement, examined the scene, and finally nodded. "Self-defense. Clear-cut. Kane's death will be ruled justified. Your father, Miss Ashford, has been taken into federal custody. The evidence you provided ensured his arrest. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." Eleanor absorbed that information, felt it settle into the space where family used to exist. "Good." Her voice was hollow. "He deserves worse, but good." The ride back to the safe house passed in silence. Eleanor leaned against Victor, processing trauma, processing how close she'd come to getting them both killed. When they arrived, Victor led her inside, drew a bath, sat beside the tub while she soaked away the grime and fear. "I should have listened to you." Eleanor finally spoke. "Should have stayed here. You thought you were helping." Victor's hand found hers. "You thought you could end the threat faster. That's not stupid, Eleanor. That's brave. It was reckless. So is everything about us." Victor managed a small smile. "But we're alive. We survived. That's what matters." That night, they lay tangled together, neither able to sleep despite exhaustion. Eleanor traced patterns on Victor's chest, felt his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Kane is dead. My father's in prison. The threats are gone. Do we just go back to normal?" Victor's arms tightened around her. "I don't know what normal looks like anymore. But Eleanor, I know I don't want to lose this. Lose you. If you need time, space, whatever, I understand. You've been through hell because of me. Because of Kane," Eleanor corrected. "And I don't want space, Victor. I want..." She searched for words. "I want to figure out who I am when I'm not running. Not hiding. Not defined by other people's expectations or betrayals. But I want to do that with you. If you'll wait." Victor kissed her forehead. "I'll wait as long as you need. For the first time in 3 years. I have a reason to build something instead of destroying. You gave me that." They fell asleep holding each other. 2 survivors beginning the long process of healing, of becoming more than the sum of their traumas. Outside, dawn broke over the lake, painting the world in shades of hope neither of them had dared believe in for far too long. 3 weeks after Vincent Kane's death, Eleanor sat in a therapist's office in Midtown Manhattan, talking about trauma and trust and the weight of surviving when others hadn't. Dr. Rebecca Martinez listened with professional compassion, asking questions that peeled back layers Eleanor had spent months building to protect herself. Victor waited in the car outside, faithful as a guard dog, present for every session, even though Eleanor insisted he didn't need to be. But he came anyway, reading architectural journals while she worked through the darkness Kane and her father had planted in her psyche. The sessions helped. Slowly, painfully, Eleanor began separating what had been done to her from who she actually was, began understanding that survival didn't require her to be strong every moment, that breaking down was part of healing, not weakness. Victor had his own therapist now, someone specializing in rage disorders and PTSD. He'd started medication that took the edge off his episodes, combined with techniques for managing triggers before they consumed him. The change wasn't instantaneous, but Eleanor noticed the difference. Moments where he'd pause, breathe, choose response over reaction. Julian Ashford's trial made headlines for 2 weeks. Eleanor didn't attend, couldn't stomach seeing her father in court, listening to his excuses, but she read the verdict when it came through. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, embezzlement, accessory to murder. Life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Michael Brennan had disappeared. Some said he'd fled the country. Others whispered darker endings involving the council's reach extending beyond American borders. Eleanor didn't care. He was gone. Another ghost from her destroyed life, and she felt nothing but relief. Victor's empire transformed as well. He'd started systematically divesting from gray area operations, investing in legitimate businesses, real estate development, technology startups. The violence that had defined him began receding, replaced by strategy and careful planning. He'd never be entirely clean. Eleanor understood that. Men like Victor didn't just walk away from their past. But he was trying, genuinely trying to build something that wouldn't require bloodshed to maintain. 1 month after Kane's death, Victor made an offer that both terrified and thrilled Eleanor. "Come work with me. Not as an assistant, as a partner. Chief Operating Officer of the new Sterling Development Corporation. Real salary, real authority, real opportunity." Eleanor had stared at him across his desk. This man who'd gone from stranger to salvation to lover in the span of weeks. "Victor, I need to be able to stand on my own, to know I can survive without you." His expression had flickered with hurt, but he'd nodded. "I understand. How long do you need?" 6 months. Eleanor had thought about it constantly, run the numbers, measured her fear against her need for independence. 6 months living separately, working somewhere else, proving to myself I'm whole without you. If we still want this afterward, if it's real and not just trauma bonding or gratitude, then we try. Actually try. Victor had agreed, though Eleanor saw the cost in his eyes. She moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn, took a position at a boutique consulting firm that didn't ask too many questions about her gap year, started rebuilding credit, friendships, a sense of self that existed independent of men who'd defined her for too long. They kept in touch. Brief texts, occasional phone calls, nothing substantial but enough to know the other was alive and safe. Eleanor threw herself into work, into therapy, into discovering who she was when not cleaning offices or calming Victor's rage or running from assassins. She made friends, real ones, who knew her story and chose to stick around anyway. She took piano lessons again, fingers remembering melodies she'd thought lost forever. She sat in her small apartment and felt peace, actual peace, for the first time since her world had exploded. Victor, from what Sarah Chen reported during their monthly coffee dates, was transforming too. His therapy was working, His business was flourishing, and he'd established a foundation in Katya's name that helped trafficking victims rebuild their lives. He was becoming the man he'd wanted to be before tragedy had hardened him into something cruel. The 6 months passed simultaneously too fast and achingly slow. Eleanor woke on the final day with her stomach in knots, uncertain what she wanted, terrified of making the wrong choice. She dressed carefully, professional, but not trying too hard, and took the subway to Victor's office building. Her hands shook in the elevator, and she almost pressed the button to go back down 3 times before the doors opened on the executive floor. The receptionist recognized her, smiled warmly. "Miss Ashford. Mr. Sterling said to send you right in." Victor's office looked different. The cold minimalism had been softened with plants, artwork that wasn't just expensive but meaningful, photographs of Katya that celebrated her life rather than mourning her death, and architectural drawings, dozens of them, pinned to boards along one wall. He stood at the window, back to the door, and Eleanor's heart clenched at the sight of him. Still tall, still imposing, but something about his posture seemed lighter, less burdened. He turned when he heard her enter, and the smile that crossed his face was unguarded, genuine. 6 months. His voice carried a slight tremor. "You look..." He stopped, started again. "You look happy." "I am." Eleanor moved further into the room. "I built a life, Victor. Not a big one, not glamorous, but it's mine. I chose every piece of it. That's all I wanted for you." Victor stayed where he was, giving her space, to be whole on your own terms. They stood in silence for a long moment, and Eleanor realized this was the test. Not whether they still felt attraction, that was obvious in the tension crackling between them, but whether they still wanted the complication, the risk, the work of building something real. "I thought about you every day." Eleanor said it quietly, told myself I shouldn't, that I needed distance to heal properly. But Victor, you were there anyway. In small moments, in choices I made, in the space beside me that felt empty, even when I was happy. Victor's hands clenched at his sides. I counted days. Pathetic, I know, but I marked them off like a prisoner marking time. Woke up every morning wondering if you decided you were better off without the complications I bring. "Are you?" Eleanor asked. "Better? Healthier?" "Yes." Victor's honesty was stark. "I'm not cured, probably never will be completely, but I can manage it now. Can choose how I respond instead of being controlled by it. I'm building things instead of destroying them, because you showed me it was possible." Eleanor crossed the distance between them, stopped close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching. "I don't need you to survive anymore. That was important for me to know, to feel. But Victor, I want you. Choose you. Not out of gratitude or fear or trauma, but because being with you makes me want to be braver, stronger, more than I thought I could be." Victor's hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverence. "I'm going to ask you something, and you can say no. You can walk away and I'll respect it, won't make it difficult. But Eleanor, will you give us a real chance? Not as boss and assistant, not as protector and protected, but as partners. Equals building something together." "Yes." Eleanor leaned into his touch. "That's what I want too." Victor kissed her then, slow and deep, and full of 6 months of restraint breaking like a dam. Eleanor kissed him back, hands fisting in his shirt, tasting coffee and possibility and home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "The COO position is still open, if you want it, but no pressure. We can keep our professional and personal lives separate if that's better." Eleanor laughed, surprised by joy bubbling up unexpectedly. "Let me think about it. I'm good at my current job, making real contributions. But the idea of working with you, building something together," she smiled. "It's appealing." They spent the rest of the day talking, about the 6 months apart, about changes they'd made, about fears and hopes and what a future might look like. Victor showed her architectural drawings he'd been working on, buildings designed for beauty and function rather than profit. Eleanor shared recordings of piano pieces she'd relearned, music filling his office with something soft and alive. 3 months later, Eleanor accepted the COO position, Not because Victor offered it, but because the company's direction aligned with her values, because she saw opportunity to do meaningful work, because mixing professional and personal felt right now instead of dangerous. They worked side by side, complementing each other's strengths, challenging each other's assumptions. Employees who'd known Victor as cold and explosive discovered he could laugh, could listen, could lead without fear. They credited Eleanor, but she knew better. Victor had done the work himself. She'd just shown him it was worth trying. 6 months after Eleanor accepted the COO role, Victor proposed. Not in some grand gesture with cameras and crowds, but in his apartment on a quiet Tuesday evening, both of them exhausted from work, her feet in his lap while they reviewed quarterly reports. "Marry me," he said it casually, but his hands trembled slightly as they held the small velvet box. "Not because you need me, or I need you. Because we choose each other. Because everything is better when we're together." Eleanor stared at the ring, simple and elegant and perfect. "Are you sure? We've barely had a year without someone trying to kill us. Shouldn't we, I don't know, make sure this works in actual peacetime?" Victor laughed, and the sound filled Eleanor with warmth. "We've survived assassins, conspiracies, and 6 months apart. I think we can handle peace, but if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll always wait for you." Eleanor took the ring, slid it onto her finger, watched it catch the light. "Ask me properly." Victor's smile widened. He slid off the couch, went to one knee with theatrical flourish that made Eleanor laugh. "Eleanor Ashford, you walked into my life when I was drowning in rage and darkness. You showed me I could be more than my worst moments. Will you marry me? Build a life with me? Keep choosing me the way I'll keep choosing you?" "Yes." Eleanor pulled him up, kissed him thoroughly. Yes to all of it. The wedding was small, intimate, just close friends and Sarah Chen serving as Eleanor's maid of honor. No media, no society pages, no echoes of the life Eleanor had lost. Just two people promising to weather storms together, to build something real from the ashes of their separate traumas. 1 year after the wedding, they stood together at the opening of the Katya Sterling Center, a facility providing housing, therapy, and job training for trafficking survivors. Victor cut the ribbon with Eleanor beside him, both of them knowing this was what mattered. Not the money or power or reputation, but using their resources to help people who'd been broken by men like Vincent Kane. That night, back in their apartment, now decorated with both their choices, their history, Eleanor stood at the window overlooking the city that had destroyed and rebuilt her. Victor came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" Eleanor asked. "The old life, the power that came from fear instead of respect?" "Not even a little." Victor's voice was certain. "This is better. Harder, but better. We're building something that lasts instead of destroying everything we touch." Eleanor turned in his arms, looked at this man who'd been her salvation and her choice, her partner and her equal. "No regrets?" "Not one." Victor kissed her forehead. "Well, maybe wishing I'd met you sooner, before all the damage. But then we wouldn't be who we are." Eleanor smiled. "Wouldn't understand each other the way we do. The damage is part of our story." Victor pulled her closer. "Then I guess I wouldn't change anything. Every hell we went through led here. Led to you standing in my arms. Choosing me every day. That's worth any price." They stood wrapped together as the city glittered below them. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and built something luminous. Not perfect. Never perfect. But real and chosen and worth fighting for. And somewhere in the distance, if Eleanor listened carefully, she could hear piano music drifting through memory and possibility, playing melodies of second chances and hard-won peace and love that survived when everything else burned away.